Good evening and welcome to the CASAA update for the week of 5/2/2016. Hi, Alex. What's new and exciting this week?
It's been a while.
It has. It has. It's been 2 weeks. Last week, I didn't have anybody who could produce a decent quality show. I was on another show on Monday night and it sounded like I was in a wind tunnel. So you definitely didn't want me bringing you on Monday night. We would have both sounded like we were going to be swept away in a hurricane. So
Nice.
at least the sound quality is better tonight.
I'll take it.
Yeah, me too. So
So I don't know where we left off. I guess I don't know what I haven't had a chance to check and see. We didn't put anything out last week, right?
right.
Okay. Um, so I'm kind of reaching into the Wayback Machine here. Um, I don't know if we've talked at all really about the Cole Bishop Amendment.
Yeah,
Do you remember that at
yeah, I
all?
do remember that. I know. I think I discussed it a little the week I did the 3.5 minute update, but I didn't really go into detail.
Well,
So,
yeah, it certainly deserves a little bit more detail and maybe a little bit of an update in terms
mhm,
of next steps.
right,
So, for those that don't know, the Cole Bishop Amendment was language that was added to an agriculture appropriations
operations.
bill, which will be part of the overall kind of U.S. budget bill, much like what we saw last year where this thing kind of came down to the wire in late December.
Hmm.
There was actually lots of people, lots of media types and policy wonks kind of hanging out on Twitter at 2 o'clock in the morning, waiting to get their hands on a copy of the final budget bill to
Right.
see, um, what riders made it in and so on.
Hmm.
And at that time, we actually knew that e-cigarettes were not going to be a part of it, but it was actually kind of fun to sit there and it's like waiting for Santa Claus to land on your roof. It was I don't know if it'll be the same feeling this year, but I thought that was interesting. So anyway, this will likely drag out until the end of the year,
Right.
um, and yeah. This, however, is remarkably different language than what we saw last year. There are more, there's more bits and pieces to it, and this is not simply a matter of changing the predicate date. Uh, so we're monitoring this as it goes through the process, and there's a couple of things to point out. Um, Number one, this is language that's going in a budget bill. That means we'll be right back here next year negotiating similar language to go into the budget bill. This does not make a permanent change to the statute.
Hmm.
This is sort of a, I like to think of this as sort of getting our foot in the door, and which is a good thing. If this language stays in, it means that we've managed to win some hearts and minds in Congress. So that is sort of the point to this. And without going too deeply into the nitty gritty of the language, um, it should be clear to some people that concessions were made. Concessions were made in order to make this a bipartisan bill
Right.
that Democrats and Republicans could both support. Um, but as far as CASAA is concerned, um, you know, we I'll just leave it at we're monitoring the situation.
I, I I was asked about this more than once, like in the past week or so, and all I've told people is you can get a copy of this and read it for yourself. It's not
Yeah.
really that hard to read, and I think there's some language in there that's a little concerning.
Yeah,
But yeah, go ahead.
and again, nothing about this is set in stone. This type of maneuver does not actually change the statute. This is simply something, if you read the language, it's, along the lines of it. Well, I mean, it literally is no funds will be made available for, just to paraphrase, the FDA to enforce the 2007 predicate date,
Mm-hmm.
um, and uh, and that's that.
Yeah.
This is still negotiable next year.
Mm-hmm.
There is still hopefully a vehicle for kind of a clean, uh, eventually, I think our, you know, goal here is that we we get some sort of standalone legislation that just officially changes the statute,
Mm-hmm.
changes the predicate date.
Yes.
That would be ideal. But we don't live in a vacuum, and I don't ride a unicorn to work, so we have to be somewhat realistic about the process. Um, so that's that. I will say, there's chatter out there saying that HR 2058 is no longer a viable option. And I will return to my earlier statement that I made just a matter of seconds ago, saying that ideally, at some point, we want some standalone legislation to change the statute.
Mm-hmm.
So something like HR 2058 is our goal.
Right.
And you know, I don't know how much I'm actually speaking on behalf of CASAA for this, but personally, I'm not willing to accept that HR 2058 or something like it is dead in the water.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are a couple of things that we accomplish by continuing to urge people to write their congressmen and urge them to co-sponsor HR 2058,
Mm-hmm.
namely keeping the conversation alive and continuing to put this issue in front of lawmakers, so they realize that we're very passionate about this and we really do want some substantive changes to the statute.
Okay.
Um, so that's that, and I, I think, well, that's not that the next steps for this bill um, are sort of, I think we're already through with the markup period. I could be wrong about that. That's basically just some minor changes to the language, nothing substantive. It probably won't change much from how it's written now.
Mm-hmm.
And then the real goal here is going to be to keep it in the budget bill. There will be opportunities coming up, I believe, in June, where there's an opportunity for that language to be removed. So there's still more work to be done, and at least for now, one of our goals for this year is to keep that language in to some extent,
Mm-hmm.
um, despite whatever issues we might have with the legislation. It does advocate for a change in the predicate date, and that's something that we support. So that's the straight dope on the Cole Bishop Amendment.
Okay.
The other bit of news is if you live in Indiana's 9th Congressional District, you're looking at a pretty important race. Indiana's Attorney General is running for that seat. Uh, is it Greg Zeller?
Mm-hmm.
Um, he is kind of outspoken anti-vaping, um, and I think legally I'm sort of bound to just tell you that much. There are 6 or 7 candidates in the field, and uh, at least, at least 2 of them have either made public statements against vapor products or have a voting record against the vaping industry in Indiana. Um, Recently, over the weekend, the
Mm-hmm.
kind of candidate questionnaire that we sent out, um, a couple people heard back from Trey Hollingsworth III,
All right.
and he basically sent a message back to them, and we were able to update our uh, voter guide with his statement that was actually uh, somewhat supportive of the vapor industry and access to vapor products. So um, if you live in Indiana's ninth district, please check out our blog. We have the voter guide posted on our blog under Indiana. If you just go to the calls to action by state, you can click on Indiana, and it should be at the top of the list there. We'll give you a rundown of candidate positions. But again, and this is something that people should be. This is sort of applicable to the rest of the country. We are working on a project more to get a better understanding of candidates' positions on this issue. Um, but as it stands now, we just really don't have a whole lot of data. And at the state level, um, you have several states who have seen legislation that would impact vapor products. Um, and we like to think that we can kind of gauge someone's position based on their vote on a particular bill.
Right.
Uh, but this doesn't really tell the whole story. They may have had to vote a certain way for political reasons, but at the core, they really believe that there's a different way to regulate these products, or there's something more appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just going on voting record alone is not really the best way to determine someone's stance on these products. Hopefully soon. I've never done anything like this before, so I'm not exactly sure what the amount of work that's actually involved in doing kind of a mail campaign to candidates.
Right.
Um, but hopefully soon we will be able to produce, a questionnaire, and hopefully they will perk up and pay attention and actually respond. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so we'll see how that goes. But we are working to be able to provide voters with some information about, how candidates feel about this issue.
Okay.
The other thing, there's two things going on starting tomorrow that I'll be involved in.
Okay.
Tomorrow afternoon, I will be in Providence, Rhode Island. There
Oh, wow.
is the House Committee on Finance is holding a hearing on Tobacco 21 legislation. We
Mm-hmm.
just put out a call to action for that this morning, actually
Yes.
more around lunchtime. And that is SB 7737, just straightforward, raise the age to purchase vapor products and tobacco products to 21. Um, and no grandfather provision, just, yeah. And it's kind of ironic, actually, that uh, one of the things I noticed in reading the legislation in the legislative intent section, they actually quoted the Institutes of Medicine review of Tobacco 21 policy, and I, I'm always, I think most of us, I think, are kind of curious how different organizations and legislative bodies sort of twist information to suit their needs. And the way that they present it actually kind of sounds like we've collected data on this policy, and this is what we can expect. Thousands of people, stopping smoking, and thousands of people avoiding certain diseases, and so on. Um, that's not actually what the Institutes of Medicine looked into. They ran uh, a couple of scenarios through some computer modeling and came up with an estimate of 3 million more smokers, well, 3 million more people not smoking uh, as a result of this policy, um, as opposed to, just maintaining the status quo in something like 45 years, which, arguably electronic cigarettes will be able to achieve something like that within the next five or less. I think originally I had said 2 years, but I think five is probably a more palatable number to throw out there. Um, so I've been spending the past 2 days kind of refining my testimony. I only have like 3 to 5 minutes to speak, so I can't really get too deeply into the science. So Julie and Greg have been helping me with putting together some very detailed written testimony that we'll be submitting tomorrow. So that is at between 4 and 4:30 tomorrow. The hearing room, I believe, is in the basement. It is room 35, and apparently, because it's in the basement, it is the one of the coldest committee hearing rooms in the Capitol. I believe someone had said they have actually spent uh, committee hearings in that room wearing winter coats. Um, so that could be an adventure. Um, but I'm looking forward to it. I know that there's some very passionate advocates in Rhode Island, and I'm looking forward to meeting them
Mhm.
and standing side by side in opposition to this bill. Um, the other thing that's happening on Wednesday, um, the New York SFATA chapter is having a lobby day in Albany,
Right.
and I will be joining them for that, much like what I did in Sacramento.
Mhm.
Um, so the situation is a bit different in New York. You know, there's no like one bill that's headed straight for the governor's desk or anything like that. But there is a rather large list of bills. There's typically a lot of legislation proposed in New York every year. Again, I have a lot of work to do for the rest of the night.
Yeah, you do, actually.
But before I drive to Rhode Island tomorrow. Um, yeah, a really interesting couple of days coming up, and I'll be happy to have some updates at the beginning of next week. Um,
Yeah.
I managed to sit here and talk for 15 minutes, really, without bringing up the Royal College of Physicians report.
Yeah. I was kind of waiting for that.
um, what an amazing tool that the UK has given us.
Yeah.
Uh, I intend to use this at every opportunity to advocate for protecting our access to vapor products and promoting accurate information about the products. I don't know if you're following kind of the Twitter back and forth between.
The Twitter
Uh,
back and forth, the letters and the times. Yes.
oh, what? No, I was just talking about. I was gonna mention this little town in Georgia, just outside of Atlanta,
Okay.
um, Clarkston, Georgia. It's roughly 7,000 people. It's really
Okay.
not a big place, but their young, tech-savvy mayor, uh, self-described progressive, advocating for decriminalizing marijuana and et cetera, um, is I guess they're going to have a public hearing tomorrow about an indoor vaping ban.
Right.
Um, and I was actually able to use the Royal College of Physicians report to drive home the point that uh, even they are stating that uh, state regulations that prohibit the use of vapor products in public spaces and workplaces, would be inappropriate at this time. Um, so it's actually very interesting to see someone else kind of cherry picking the RCP report to suit their agenda,
Right.
and doing a very poor job of it. So that'll be actually a very interesting thing to watch going forward, is some of the activist types that you find on social media, cherry picking the RCP report to suit their agenda, and doing it in very strange ways. Um, and I have not actually sat down and read all 200 pages of the report yet. Um, but I can tell you, if you do have to get into a Twitter war with somebody over this report, um, it's very well organized, which I would expect that from the oldest professional organization on the planet.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's an excellent piece of, you know, regulatory review and scientific review, um, and I'm really looking forward to incorporating some of the points from that report into our legislative correspondence going forward. And I really hope that for those that don't know, the Royal College of Physicians released their report on smoking and health in 1962, which was 2 years before the U.S. Surgeon General
Hmm.
released his report. So it would be nice to see history kind of repeat itself.
Hmm.
And I mean, if the U.S. Surgeon General could get on board with something like this, that's a total game changer. I think it's all of our sincere hope that the U.S. officials are paying very close attention to this and taking it to heart. Um, and yeah, I just, everybody out there share the hell out of it. It's great.
That's good stuff. That is good stuff right there.
Yeah,
So, so is that it for this evening, Alex? I'm
I think so.
okay.
I'm sure I forgot something, but um,
Um,
whatever. We'll pick it up next week.
we absolutely will. Have a nice drive to Providence. I'm kind of envious. I went to high school there, so
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right. I remember you were originally from the Northeast.
yeah, yeah.
Is there like, am I supposed to get like some pizza somewhere in Rhode Island or?
Um, if you get to go to, if College Hill is anything like I remember, that place was awesome. There was this little tiny, teeny tiny shack of a restaurant right on the Brown University grounds that had all the very best food you could eat, very cheap. Um, you would leave College Hill and just walk past Brown University, and like maybe a block down from there is this little restaurant called Rosie's, and
All
it
right.
has the best food I've ever eaten. I miss it. It's good stuff.
Well, I'll have to seek it out. I'm sure I'm gonna need to fuel up before I head to Albany tomorrow night. So, um,
My God. So I got you on your like one night home.
I'll be home on Thursday.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, your wife is a very patient person,
Yep. That's
and
true.
yeah, it is true. So thank you for everything you do for us, and thank Eve for her patience.
I will. And thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Have a great night. See you
Good
next
night.
week.
See ya.